Picture this. It's a Friday evening. You've just finished a long week of work. You're wearing a button-down shirt because you had a meeting that morning. The car is clean. The registration is current. The insurance is paid. You are doing everything right, every single thing. And still, when you see those blue lights flicker in your rearview mirror, your whole body changes. Your jaw tightens. Your hands go to 10 and 2. Your voice drops 2 registers before you've said a single word. You're not nervous because you did something wrong. You're nervous because you've been here before, or your father has, or your brother has, and you've all had the same conversation, the same careful, deliberate instructions about how to stay alive during a routine traffic stop. That moment right there, that's not just anxiety. That's 100 years of American history sitting in the passenger seat with you. Because here's what most people outside our community don't fully understand. The relationship between Black men and car culture in America has never been just about horsepower, chrome, or the freedom of the open road. From the very moment we started buying cars, the system pushed back. It has been pushing back for over a century through discriminatory dealerships, redlined neighborhoods demolished by highways, insurance companies that charge more because of your zip code, and traffic stops that turn a broken taillight into a life or death encounter. And through all of it, Black men found a way to love cars anyway. They found a way to make the automobile mean something, something loud, something personal, something that said, I am here and I am not invisible. Today, we're exploring 10 brutal facts about being a Black man in car culture that nobody talks about. Facts rooted in history, backed by data, and felt in the chest of every man who's ever had the talk before he got his driver's license. Let's start with the one that touches every single one of us the moment we get behind the wheel. Driving. While Black is not a phrase, it's a documented, peer-reviewed, federally acknowledged reality, and the numbers behind it will take your breath away. The Stanford Open Policing Project, led by researcher Sharad Goel, analyzed nearly 100 million traffic stops across 21 state patrol agencies and 35 municipal departments from 2011 to 2017. Their conclusion was unambiguous. Black drivers were approximately 20% more likely to be stopped than white drivers relative to their population share. The researchers used the veil of darkness test, comparing stop rates during daylight versus after dark, when officers cannot easily see a driver's race. The gap shrank noticeably after sunset. When officers could not see race, Black drivers were stopped less often. That single finding tells you everything you need to know. The Bureau of Justice Statistics confirmed it from a different angle. 9% of Black drivers were searched or arrested during stops, compared to 3% of white drivers. That is a 3-to-1 ratio. And here is the part that makes it worse. White drivers were significantly more likely to receive a warning. Black drivers were more likely to receive a ticket, a search, or worse. In North Carolina, Frank Baumgartner's 14-year analysis of traffic data found that Black drivers were 115% more likely to be searched, yet contraband was discovered more often in searches of white drivers. Less justification, more intrusion, more consequence, every time. But this story did not start with a dashboard camera or a viral video. It started with a man named Victor Hugo Green, a postal carrier from Harlem, who, in 1936, published a 15-page booklet called the Negro Motorist Green Book. He named it after himself. The guide was simple in concept and revolutionary in necessity, a list of hotels, restaurants, and gas stations where Black travelers would not be turned away, humiliated, or harmed. Green was named after Victor Hugo, the French novelist. There was something quietly poetic about that. A Black man using his pen to chart the landscape of a country that had marked him as dangerous before he ever turned a key. The guide grew. By 1947, it was over 80 pages. By 1962, More than 2 million copies were in circulation. It listed specific places: the Sugar Bowl on Georgia Avenue in Washington, the Center Avenue YMCA in Pittsburgh, the Lyric Theater in Miami's Overtown. You could buy it for $0.25 in 1937 and $1.25 by 1957. Standard Oil's Esso stations distributed it because, remarkably, more than a third of Esso dealers in the 1940s were black, an exception in an industry that mostly shut black entrepreneurs out. Victor Green died in 1960. His wife, Alma, kept publishing until 1966, 2 years after the Civil Rights Act made the guide's purpose legally obsolete. He never got to see the world he dreamed of. In his own introduction, he wrote that one day, the guide would no longer need to be published. He was right about the day coming. He just did not get to be here for it. Now, here's something that doesn't make the evening news, but should. When you walk into a dealership, you may be quoted a completely different price than the man who walked in before you. Not because your credit is different, not because your income is different, but because of your name, because of your face, because of your skin. Yale law professor Ian Ayres published research in the Harvard Law Review in 1991 after sending testers of different races and genders to 90 Chicago area dealerships, all using identical bargaining scripts. The results were stark and specific. Black men were quoted markups more than twice as high as white men. Black women were quoted markups more than 3 times as high. In raw dollars, black men paid roughly $1,000 more for the same car. This was not a fluke. Ayres expanded the study in 1995, testing over 400 vehicles at more than 200 dealerships. Same result. The National Fair Housing Alliance updated the research in 2018, sending matched testers where the black testers were actually more financially qualified, with better credit scores and better income to debt ratios. And yet, 62.5% of the time, the non-white tester received worse pricing. Think about that. They brought more to the table, and they still left the table having paid more. Professor Ayres' conclusion was measured but devastating. Black buyers simply cannot purchase the same car for the same price as white buyers, even when using identical strategies. And then there's the loan. Even if you somehow negotiate to the same sticker price, the financing waiting for you on the back end has its own premium. Here is how it works. The lender sets a base interest rate, and the dealership is allowed to mark it up and pocket the difference. The customer never sees the base rate. It is called dealer reserve, and it is perfectly legal. Economist Jonathan Lanning analyzed millions of auto loans for the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago and found that black borrowers were disproportionately charged the maximum allowable markup, 2 full percentage points, resulting in nearly $1,400 in additional interest over the life of the average loan. That is not one dealer making a bad call. That is a systemic pattern across millions of transactions. A separate study published in the Review of Financial Studies in 2023 found that minority borrowers paid 70 basis points more in interest rates on average. And here is the irony that should make your blood boil: they defaulted less. They were better borrowers by the lender's own standards, and they still paid more. The enforcement record speaks. Ally Financial settled for $98 million in 2013. Honda settled for $24 million. Toyota settled for $21.9 million. Fifth Third Bank settled for $18 million. And in 2018, the federal guidance that had been closing that gap by 60% was quietly repealed. The settlement stopped. The disparity continued. Let's go back further, back to a time when some towns in this country weren't just unfriendly to black travelers. They were legally, violently enforced as white-only spaces once the sun dropped below the horizon. Sociologist James Loewen spent years researching what he called sundown towns, and what he found shattered the comfortable myth that this was a Southern problem. He expected to find 50 sundown towns across the entire country. He found more than 500 in Illinois alone. Historians estimate up to 10,000 such towns existed between 1890 and 1960, and they were most common not in the South, but in the Midwest and West, in states like Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Oregon, Missouri, and Michigan. Some had signs posted on the city limits. Some used warning bells and sirens. In Minden, Nevada, and Gardnerville, Nevada, those sirens rang every evening from 1917 until 1974. 57 years of a siren saying, "You are not welcome to exist here after dark." 44 of the 89 counties along Route 66, the most celebrated road in American mythology, were effectively sundown jurisdictions during the 1930s. The road trip, that most American of freedoms, was a different journey entirely if you were Black. You planned your route around safe towns. You carried food, portable toilets, and extra gasoline. You did not stop after dark if you could help it. You kept a copy of the Green Book on the passenger seat, and you prayed the car did not break down in the wrong county. That was the American open road for a Black family in the middle of the 20th century. And if you somehow made it safely through sundown country and arrived home, the insurance company was waiting to take another cut. In April 2017, ProPublica and Consumer Reports published an investigation that analyzed 30 million insurance quotes alongside state-level accident data across California, Illinois, Texas, and Missouri. What they found was damning. Major insurers charged minority neighborhoods as much as 30% more than areas with statistically identical accident risk. In Illinois, 33 of the 34 companies analyzed charged at least 10% more in minority zip codes. Liberty Mutual and Safeco charged 33% higher premiums in minority neighborhoods in California. The Consumer Federation of America found the annual premium gap in Washington, D.C. ran to $326 per year between Black and white drivers. That's money leaving the community every single year. Not because Black drivers crash more, the data does not support that, but because of zip codes, because of credit scores shaped by generations of redlining. The insurers did not have to ask about race. They just had to use the zip code, and the zip code told them everything they needed to know about how much they could charge. Now, here is the one that cuts deepest, because it is not about something that happens to you on the road. It is about something that happened to the road itself. In 1956, the Federal Aid Highway Act launched the greatest public works program in American history. 41,000 miles of interstate highways, 90% federally funded. By the time the concrete dried, the U.S. Department of Transportation estimates that more than 1 million people had been displaced. And though Black Americans made up just 13% of the population in 1960, they comprised at least 55% of those pushed out of their homes. In 1963, James Baldwin put a name to it. He said, "Urban renewal means Negro removal." Robert Moses, who controlled New York City's infrastructure for 44 years, routed his Cross Bronx Expressway through integrated neighborhoods even when a one-block deviation would have spared them. 60,000 residents were displaced. The South Bronx lost 80% of its housing stock in the fires that followed, as landlords collecting up to $150,000 per fire in insurance burned what they could no longer profit from. In Miami, the neighborhood called Overtown had 40,000 to 50,000 residents and hundreds of Black-owned businesses. It was the place where Count Basie, Ella Fitzgerald, and Billie Holiday performed, because segregated hotels would not have them. It was carved open by Interstate 95. 12,000 to 15,000 people were displaced. An alternative route along the railroad would have caused almost none of that. They chose the other route. In New Orleans, they built Interstate 10 over Treme, the oldest continuously existing Black neighborhood in America, and paved over the live oak canopy of Claiborne Avenue where generations of families had gathered. Urban 3 estimates the unrealized property loss at over $1 billion. Durham, Syracuse, St. Paul. City after city, The highway went through the black neighborhood when another route was always available. New York University law professor Deborah Archer, who also serves as a CLU board chair, called it precisely what it was: white men's roads through black men's homes. And here is what all of that displacement, all of that financial extraction, all of those stops in the rearview mirror, all of those overpriced loans and inflated premiums have added up to: a car ownership gap that closes slowly and a psychological weight that does not close at all. Today, roughly 94% of white households own at least one vehicle. For black households, that number sits around 82%. That gap represents roughly 2.5 million black households navigating American life, built entirely around car ownership. Without a car, they are 3 times more likely to depend on public transit. In Chicago, a study found that every single entry-level job in the city was reachable within 90 minutes by car. By public transit, only 60% of those same jobs could be reached. That is not a commute problem. That is an economic ceiling built into the infrastructure, and the households that do own vehicles often pay proportionally more to keep them. More for insurance, more for financing, more in maintenance on older cars bought because new ones cost too much after the markup, the loan premium, and the insurance surcharge all pile up. A study from 2024 found 76% of black households are financially burdened by transportation costs, spending over 15% of monthly income just to stay mobile. Mobility, the thing the car was supposed to be about. Freedom, and it costs more if you are black. Which brings us finally to the toll that cannot be measured in dollars, but is measured in cortisol and blood pressure and restless nights and conversations that parents dread having and children dread needing. Researchers at New York University surveyed more than 1,200 young black men in New York City and found that those with higher rates of police contact showed dramatically higher rates of anxiety and trauma symptoms. A 2022 study found that negative police encounters explain 21% of the total effect on generalized anxiety in black adults. The George Washington University Manhood Study followed nearly 900 black men in Washington, D.C., and found that the chronic stress of simply anticipating police contact, altering your behavior, your route, your posture, your clothes, just to reduce the probability of a stop, was itself a pathway to depression. The American Public Health Association classified law enforcement violence as a public health crisis in 2017, and Johns Hopkins published research in 2024 showing that black youth who received the talk, the conversation about how to survive a traffic stop, reported significantly lower anticipatory stress, 28% compared to 53% among those who had not received it. Think about that for a moment. The act of sitting your child down and telling them how to stay alive on a routine drive reduced their anxiety by nearly half, because those children had already absorbed the world they were driving into. They already knew, before anyone said a word, that the road was different for them. And yet, through all of it, through the discrimination at the dealership, the predatory loan, the insurance surcharge, the highway built through their neighborhood, and the flashing lights in the rearview mirror, black men built something extraordinary in car culture. They built the Cadillac culture that literally saved that brand from bankruptcy during the Great Depression, when black buyers kept purchasing while white sales cratered. They built lowrider culture on the boulevards of Los Angeles and the donk scene on the streets of Miami, and Houston slab culture, slow, loud, and bangin', where men spent anywhere from $22,000 to well over $100,000 customizing a key that said, "I exist, I have taste, I have skill, I am here." They built the carpool networks during the Montgomery bus boycott that served 17,000 riders a day, running circles around the city's segregation. They turned the car into something the country was trying to make into a weapon of anxiety, and turned it instead into a declaration. That is not a small thing. That is, in fact, a remarkable thing. Victor Hugo Green spent 30 years making sure black travelers could get from one safe place to another. He died before the guide became unnecessary. But the spirit in what he did, the understanding that the road is more dangerous for some of us, and that knowledge shared is danger reduced, never left. It lives in the talk. It lives in the group chats where people share which routes to avoid. It lives in every man who adjusts his posture, his voice, his hands on the wheel, not out of guilt, but out of survival. The car was supposed to mean freedom. For black men in America, it has always meant something more complicated than that. Something heavier, something more hard-won, something that required a level of vigilance and resilience that most people driving beside them will never be asked to carry. That story deserves to be told, loudly, often, and with all the specific, documented, undeniable facts that prove it is not opinion. It is history, it is present tense, and it is real. Thank you for taking this journey with us today. This look back at a history that is still unfolding every time a black man turns the ignition and pulls out onto the street. If this video moved you, if it told you something you did not know, or gave words to something you have always felt, hit that like button. It takes 1 second and it means everything. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, someone who lived it, someone who loves someone who does. And if you have not subscribed yet, join the family, because there is so much more story left to tell.